Hello and welcome to Hurt Less, Live More with me, JJ, the practical alchemist, Dr. Mark Goulston, psychiatrist and coach all the way over in Los Angeles. I'm in Scotland, and we have another Californian, or at least she's living in California right now with us today. And Mark, I'll let you introduce Lisa.
We're so glad to have Lisa Goodpaster on. She really fits with the theme of our show, which is Hurt Less, Live More, because she's lived with a world of hurt, and hopefully some of you listeners will be able to identify with part of it. She's the founder of the Stephood Project, and she has a new book out called Alienated, When Parents Won't Parent. And it's really her story about being alienated from both her birth mother and her dad by her stepmother. And she kept quiet to protect her dad, and her stepmother really just did everything she could to obliterate a relationship with Lisa. And Lisa spent 40 years trying to figure this out, trying to figure out where all her hurt came from, and realizing that there's probably a number of people in the world who are dealing with this kind of hurt, where even in an intact marriage, often a one parent will alienate you from the other. And it's a special, but we think it's a widespread kind of hurt. So Lisa, welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome, Lisa. And we'd love to hear in your own words what your experience was. Tell us. You don't have to go into all the details if you don't want to, but because it's all in your book, and we'd love people to go and buy your book if they're interested. But tell us briefly just what that was all about, and we'd love to know how you've come through this.
I thought I was just another child from divorce. Typical Gen Xer. Just thought my parents had a bad divorce. And I was between the ages of 7 and 13. I went to stay with my dad. It was supposed to be a week, ended up being almost 5 years. And in those 5 years is when the alienation happens. And for your listeners, basically I was, brainwashed, or I like to say hijacked. My mind was hijacked from me. And what was implanted was a completely horrific story that changed my history in my mind. But that curious little girl in me never stopped trying to figure out why. And I just grew up thinking that I had a really bad.
So you grew up thinking what? Sorry?
That I had a really bad mom.
Oh, okay.
My mom. What was some of the messaging that your stepmom gave you about your mom?
So all of that messaging is in my book, because what she wrote and left, I remembered and I found. So it's in the book, so everyone will get this alienating, malignant narcissist, what I'm told. But I'll just say she starts off by saying that I was born evil, that I was kicking my mom in her belly, that I was born with an evil glare. It gets so bad, I kill my mom in her delusion. So the first chapter is really hard because it includes what this person, my stepmom, thought of me and wanted me to think of myself. So they just like a lot of doctors and people recognize that some parents are not okay. And it's a really hard thing to live through. And the way I fought through was that even though I was alienated from my mom and my dad, I stayed quiet. For some reason, I think it's because I'm Latina, but you can't really alienate a Latina because there's too many of us. So I got to spend time with my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. And even though that doesn't replace your parents, it was my source of love and connection. And that's what sustained me. But I went through a lot of trauma, meaning I was abused, not just physically, sexually, under my stepmom's care, not by my stepmom, by 3 different men. So the book really exposes the danger of not co-parenting and why every parent should relearn on, like that book, what to expect when you're expecting, what to expect when you don't co-parent, because you have a limited time. So that's the beginning of it. And
let me ask you, Lisa, when you looked, did you ever look to your dad and say, with a look that says, "What's up with your wife?" I mean, did you ever look at him and he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and went along with her? And yeah, you're nodding. So share a little bit with us and our audience what the nodding is about.
Yes, there were lots of times where my dad would do what parents should never do, is vent to me about his wife. And when he would vent to me, I felt like, well, he sees it too, so he can't do anything about it, and I can't say anything to her. So it made me stay silent, and it also made me feel like he couldn't protect me. And I call that, it's the ostrich parent, where they put their head in the sand, right? That's the most dangerous kind of parent, because if they allow that, they'll allow anything. My dad didn't know to the extent of what was happening. And by the time he did find out, it was very difficult. But my dad was the one that brought me the script that I remembered that I had to read as a child, as a teen. And I remembered where it was at 17 years later. And I called him crying. And I said, "Dad, I need you to get something for me." He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I need you to get the proof," because I refer to it as proof. It's like, "What proof?" "Just get the proof. It's in her nightstand." I'm referring to my stepmom. And he went. I go, "Look in her nightstand next to her bed." And it was there 17 years later. He brought it to me. And it goes more into detail in my book, but he didn't know that this happened.
And when you say the proof, in what form was the proof?
So the proof was a 58-page script that had my name on it, and it starts off with you're reading it as a little kid, and it's like, this is all about Lisa. Lisa was never loved by her mom. Lisa was in her mom's belly. Lisa was kicking her mom. Lisa was born evil. It is utterly, I think people that study this stuff really are floored by it. And for me, because I survived it and I endured it, it's pretty bad as a parent. Because, my son is 30. I do have a son. He was not alienated. And she was so bad. I rebelled, and I didn't want to be like her. I didn't want to be like parents. And I got away at 19. And I had my son at 20, and then got divorced. Then I became a flight attendant, and I met my second husband, and we were married for 20 years. So in that time, I was always in and out of counseling, just trying to figure out what's going on. Why do I have all these feelings? Why is it that when I do visit my mom, viscerally, I can't even have a moment with her? Like, I couldn't look at her in her eyes without feeling angry or disappointed. And my husband just thought, we just have really bad parents. And that wasn't the case. Both my parents came here from 2 separate countries legally, so that they can have a better life, and this wasn't supposed to happen. It did. Both my parents, God bless them, they own their failing. They own their mistake, and they stand behind my book and are glad that I'm doing what needs to be done, because this is such a enormous issue in every part of the world, in every courthouse, in every neighborhood, And we've normalized divorce, and we don't want to talk about the consequences. And that's what's in my book, is I talk about the actual consequences that happens, like, to kids as adults throughout life. Like, what are the consequences? And
Yeah, Mark, I want to ask you about whether this is, in your experience, would you say this is normal? But before I do, Lisa, I do want to ask you, because listeners will be, it's not important to your story, but I know if I was listening, and in fact sitting here, I'm saying to myself, where did your parents both come from to the USA? And, because you say you're a Latina, but, it's just, I know that people will be saying, so where from then?
so my mom was born in Mexico, and my dad was born in Central America, Honduras. And they both
Lovely, yeah.
came here legally. My dad got here when he was 18. He joined the army. And, both my parents, this was in the 70s, so they both are very hardworking, and they did very well. They had me in Catholic school. I had a very normal childhood up until about 7. The first 7 years of my life were crucial, and the rest is cautionary.
Mark, is that a normal story? It seems quite extreme to me, but what do I know?
Well, I think it's unusual, but as I'm listening to her, I'm having the feeling that it's not that unusual, but people just don't speak out. They don't speak up. They keep the family secret. And if you're listening in, maybe you can identify or relate to the feelings. What's it like to not feel safe ever? What's it like to sometimes either think you have a choice often as a child. Either they're lying to me or I'm crazy. And sometimes you'll try to convince yourself you're crazy because you don't want to think the parents that you're dependent on are lying to you because you're dependent on them. And so I'll share something that's a little tangent, but maybe listeners will identify. In my career as a therapist, I would often see couples in which one of the partners was cheating on the other one. And frequently that would be, at least years ago, would be men. Now it's about equal. And I remember frequently the man would say to his wife, "You're crazy. I'm not cheating. You're just crazy. You're just paranoid." And in an effort to preserve the marriage, she believed she was crazy, but it turned out he was cheating on her. And I remember one woman looked at me after they got divorced, and she said, "I will never disbelieve my instincts again. I will never, when my gut is telling me that someone is lying to me, I will never tell myself that I'm crazy." So I don't know how you relate to that, or JJ, if you can relate to that, but I want to normalize the experience of, what's it like when you can't trust anyone, and in an effort to preserve your connection to them, you say, well, it's not them. I just must be crazy. So can you relate to any of that, Lisa?
Yes, I can. My stepmom wanted me to be crazy. She wanted me to be in a mental institution. I was angry. I remember being really scared where I would pee in my pants as a little girl. And about 13, I just flipped and I was angry, like that angry, alienated teen that a lot of parents have to deal with because we can't express. I'm talking rage. If somebody, you protect yourself, so you develop all these protection patterns. And if somebody ever, came to me or tried to antagonize me, I would use my mouth so fast and, stuff would just fly out in an effort to protect myself. So it was really hard to grow up. I don't even know how I slept sometimes when I think about it now as an adult, because as a kid, you just endure it. You don't know the normal. What helped was once I got a little bit older in high school, is I surrounded myself with friends who had intact families because I hated what I couldn't explain. And my stepmom did such a good job as, you're just another kid from divorce. This is what happens. And I'm like, all of my cousins are divorced. Like they're like, everyone had divorced parents growing up. It was either they were divorced or not. Now it's widespread. So I was, honestly, my grandpa gave me a nickname, Tora. That's his nickname, but Toro means bull. So out of 23 grandchildren, I was Tora. So I felt, well, I guess I have to be strong, even though I didn't know what strong was. So the amount of denial and pain I had to push down.
So we're going to be going to a break in a little bit, but what I would like us to talk about is the reason we did this show, Hurt Less, Live More, is that we believe that when hurt is intolerable, people turn it into other things, and frequently they turn it into rage. So if my choice is to be so hurt that I don't even want to live, the pain is just unbearable, or to be rageful, a lot of people choose rage, and then the world says, "See, I told you so. You're just a Tora. You're just a bull. You're just an angry kid." And so I hope we'll go into this, after we go into one of our breaks for our sponsors.
Let's do that now, Mark and Lisa. Let's go to a break right now, and let's explore that when we come back after these messages from our station sponsors.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And you're listening to Hurt Less, Live More here on UK Health Radio with me, JJ, and Dr. Mark Goulston, and our fabulous guest today, Lisa Goodpaster. And Mark, we were going to explore a little bit more around Lisa's experiences.
Yeah, so when we took a break, Lisa was talking about how she coped with it by being enraged, by being angry. The nickname for her was Tora, which stands for bull. And what we wanted Lisa to talk about is, and that's what the show is about, is that a lot of people have hurt and fear, and they're afraid if I feel their hurt and fear, I won't make it through. I'll go crazy, I'll need to kill myself or whatever. And so they run away from the hurt into something else, drugs, alcohol, or rage. And so I wanted Lisa to unpack that a little bit for us, because it seems like she agreed with that.
Absolutely. I was so angry and I didn't know why. My mom, especially being the, alienated parent, she didn't know why I was so angry. So she focused on my anger, not on why I was angry. And that only infuriated me more. So I would feel it in my body. Right? You're all of a sudden, you're sitting down and you're trying to eat dinner, and I can't even listen to my own mom swallow her food. So there I am with earphones on, listening to whatever I needed to listen to, so I didn't have to hear her. And I would suppress the rage, right? Feel it in my body, but I push it down. And I would, have disproportionate reactions. The way that I survived, I had to suppress so much. I suppressed to survive. And it would just seep out, whether I was being bullied or I felt attacked. I would just lash out. I would lash out any way I could. And, when you have these like anger outbursts, I also felt really bad internally too, because like, what's wrong with me? Why would I lash out like that? And you peel back the layers, and it's because mom and dad weren't there to help regulate Lisa and say, hey, you're safe. It's okay. You don't need to yell that way.
When your stepmom was doing this in front of your dad, did it feel like she was saying, see, I told you so. Lisa's terrible. Lisa's bad. Lisa's evil. I told you so. And you can't really be nice to her because she's bad. She's evil. And, for whatever reason, your dad was conflict avoidant. And so, and his bread was buttered with his wife. You were just a child from a prior marriage. And so he just kind of went along with it, and you had to drown it out with the headphones, but you were seething inside.
Oh, yeah. I was seething. I was scared. I was just internally disappointed at my parents, because I would watch shows like the Brady Bunch and try to figure out what the hell happened to the regular parents. Just always trying to figure out. Thank God I had aunts and uncles, but I couldn't explain to them, like, something's happening. And when you rip away all the layers of anger and frustration and agony and angst, and I was screaming because I lost the attachment to both of my parents. And when that happens, kids don't know. We're too young. We're too young to understand what an attachment is. I kind of had to grow up, raise my own son to realize, holy crap, you feel it now. Like, before we had a conversation, it was like, God, I really miss my mom and dad. Wait, don't have them. You have to grow up. We have to learn how to regulate and figure out that it wasn't my fault, but it was my responsibility to walk that hard path of healing, to realize and own my truth, and the truth sets you free. And so to people out there that are angry at their parents or have suffered an ungodly amount of abuse, your voice sets you free. And I have to really emphasize that, because if I didn't remember the proof, there's no way I could write this book, because nobody would have wanted to believe. They wouldn't want to believe, because it makes everybody that's doing it, or people that are married and have these issues, it makes them mad, because it's a mirror. It's a mirror for what not to do. And I just used it as a platform to help as many families, as many kids, because I think the only reason why I didn't go to drugs and I didn't turn into what she wanted me to is because I hated her so much for what she was doing, that I wasn't going to let her dictate my life, even at that age. And by the grace of God and all that's good, thank God I'm here. But it is a uncomfortable human experience, and you're not alone. There's people that care.
So I want to tweak this a little bit for our listeners, because as JJ said earlier, our listeners might be listening to this, and if it seems a little bit extreme and they can't relate to it, I think one of the things, if you're listening in, that you might relate to, because the stories I'm going to mention are far too common. It's the child who tells the parents, my uncle, my aunt is molesting me. And nobody believes that child. So if you want to understand some of Lisa's feelings, that is far more common. You've been molested by a relative. You've been molested by an older sibling. And nobody believes you. They tell you you're making it up. So I don't want to take us down that road, but I want our listeners to get the most out of trying to understand and make sense of the rage that Lisa's speaking of. And that kind of rage is not that uncommon when your family thinks you're lying to them about something you're not.
Right. And isn't like anger is a natural, it's an emotion. That's a human emotion. We can't survive without anger, right? Like if we were back in the days of the caveman days, it's the survival of the fittest. And anger serves a purpose. Anger lets us know there's something wrong. You're not supposed to feel it throughout your childhood. And parents need to understand that this kind of abuse, parental alienation, is ripping the fabric of our humanity.
Yeah, you're so right. A wounded animal is one of the most vicious animals because they think the next wound is going to kill them. And I think that's kind of what Lisa's saying, is that the rage is protective. If you've been wounded so deeply, as deep as you can go in yourself, and you think the next wound is going to do you in, it's an animal and a human response to get angry and become enraged.
And it is common, isn't it, Mark? Because we talked about this before, when people will not look beyond the anger and just try to address the anger, which then makes the child or whoever it is even angrier because nobody's addressing the cause. Nobody's asking and nobody's listening.
Kids feel like they're being judged. They already feel embarrassed or ashamed because you just lost your mouth on your mom or dad, and that's like a big no-no. And the kid's like, but all this stuff is going on the inside, and I can't relate to that. So it's so disorienting for a child, for anybody that has gone through trauma. And it's a biological it's a human response. It's a biological response to trauma. And we're shaming kids and we're shaming survivors, and shame is the last thing anyone should have to carry.
It reminds me of something I heard the other day, not on this scale, but in terms of aiming not to shame a child. I was talking to a friend who worked in education for a long time, and how they would react to children who were constantly late for school. And instead of punishing certain children, they take them to one side, say, why were you late? And they would know, maybe the parents were on drugs, or maybe the child was caring for a parent. And so the child would talk to them. And apparently they were trained to say, well done for getting here at all. And I thought that was extraordinary, because that didn't happen in my day and age. It didn't matter what was wrong, you had to get to school on time. But I thought it was really a lovely example of how compassionate we can be now.
Yeah, I can tell you how we can go in it to a little bit further. So this may relate to your audience. So how does this play out? Because it plays out in your relationships, right? And, you end up getting mad at your partner, and you say the most awful things, and it's disproportionate. And what I would do is when I remembered what had happened to me, I went through this process of unraveling. And you kind of have to feel all this stuff to kind of heal it. And it was like my inner teenager, it was like going through menopause and puberty at the same time. That just extra layer, and you don't have patience for that, your spouse, because how can you have a bad day? You had a perfect childhood. What's wrong with you? And I'm shaming him, and I'm thinking, why in the hell would I do that? Greg can't have a bad day, because if he does, who's going to be there for me? Because no one. So you really grow up in this kind of shrunken version of yourself, but you're hiding it because we've normalized it, and it's not normal. It's not. And it's crucial that every parent, especially if they're thinking of a divorce, fine, divorce, but you better walk out of that divorce knowing we're divorced, but our kids, their foundation will not be severed. Our kids will know that they are loved, that they're supported, that they can love their mom or their dad. And that's what I did with my son. And, his dad was divorced too, and he wasn't alienated. I did everything opposite of what was done to me, off of the emotion I couldn't express. I was a little bit of a helicopter mom, yes, a little bit. And my son, thank God, he was a good kid, and he's doing very well. He was I was a present parent. And the day he left for college, everything started to unravel. I started to feel something's not right. Why do I feel sad? It's because my son was a way out of the hell that I couldn't explain. My son was a purpose, and our kids should never be our purpose. I mean, I am proud to be his mom, and he's doing wonderful, and I'm so proud of him. I'm glad that I put him first, even at the expense of keeping that trauma, because I didn't want to go there. Because when you have to, that's why it's easier to stay rageful and angry than it is to look the other way, because then you have to look at the emotions, and emotions hurt. I don't want to hurt. So a lot of times people are more comfortable in the anger, and I wasn't comfortable in the anger at all. Once you read the story, it enrages parents. It's more common than you would think. 1.7 billion hashtags for evil stepmom. There are millions of kids right now that reach out to me and say, I wish my mom would have protected me. I wish my dad would have protected me. And we're not talking about it. Everybody knows that having a step parent in a home is dangerous. It is, the statistics, it's like 800% times higher if you have a step parent in the home. And I explain this, and the step parents come at me. Where's your information for that? What are you talking about? And I'm like, this is just wrong. We've normalized it. If that's not the case, then why is divorce on adverse child experiences? If having a step parent is dangerous, it should, why isn't this added on? Because this could have been caught a long time ago if therapists would have understood, like, let's dig a little deeper. Lisa, do you have a relationship with your mom? No, I haven't seen her in 5 years. Well, why? I hate her. It's not normal for kids to hate their parents. So there's
and I can kind of see why step parents might take issue with what you're saying there, because obviously not everybody is in that same bracket. But I do understand what you're saying is that it's something we should be aware of, and that we should be more proactive around. And maybe we can explore that a little bit shortly, but it's time to take another little break right now. So if it's okay with you two, let's just take that break, and we'll be back right after this from our station sponsors.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And you're still listening to Hurt Less, Live More with me, JJ, the Practical Alchemist, and Dr. Mark Goulston and Lisa Goodpaster, who was telling us before the break about the prevalence of this issue. And I must admit that it's not something that was high on my radar as an issue. I mean, I know parents who are divorced. Mostly they try their hardest to, make sure that the kids have a balanced upbringing. But I can see how it could be an issue. Lisa's talking about it being hugely prevalent. But what can we do, Mark, to maybe help people get through this?
I think I'm biased the same way Lisa is, because for many years I was a psychotherapist focused on crisis. So I saw an unusual segment of the population, because when people came to me, they didn't come to me because they were happy. They came to me because they were traumatized. So I think your perspective is worth noting. And if you're listening to this and you're a divorced couple or the next couple, we're not attacking you. We're not accusing you of being bad parents just because you got divorced. What we're sounding the alarm about is you might want to check in with your children, whether you're in an intact marriage or divorced marriage or where you're a step parent, on their well-being. You might not want to just blow it off. And something that I brought up and I wanted us all to weigh in is I think one of the reasons that Lisa is speaking so passionately, both to parents and to the children who have gone through this is one of those topics that people listen and say, well, that's very important. But you're not going to do anything if it's important. You're only going to do something if you care enough about it. And I think Lisa, with her wonderful new book, Alienated, is a call to action, or at least the call to awareness, because this is happening. And you can't ignore it. So any thoughts, Lisa, about how to take something that people will say, well, that's very interesting, or they might be really thoughtful and caring people like JJ and say, it's not really on my radar. It sort of makes sense. And we're sorry you went through this, and we're so glad you wrote this book. Any thoughts from the three of us about how to get people to care enough about this so that they maybe increase their awareness, check in with their child, who's acting up, what's going on beneath? So any thoughts, Lisa?
When you have kids and your kids go to school or out in the world, it's every other family is divorced. We're leading in the United States, by the way, with the most single parent homes worldwide. So when you have a divorced kid that is being alienated, and that means that they have lost that attachment to their parent, they're going out in the world. They don't know this. And, hurt people. We normalize it. So when we look at, like my son, I don't want him to get married and have his child alienated from him, because it's not just, it happens to grandparents. It happens to families. It happens to intact in homes that there is no perfect family. But when we talk about this in a way of bringing awareness, not judgment, because we're all human, until we know better, we do better. And, like I said earlier in the podcast, that book, What to Expect When You're Expecting, when you first have a kid, that was like the book, don't talk about what to expect when you're going to alienate and not co-parent. And what it is when you're a child and you don't have a parent there, and kids from divorce suffer silently. And that's what trauma does, is it's not what happens to us, it's what happens inside of us. So in my case, a lot of intact families and their parents, they let me stay at their home. They let me, maybe they just felt bad for me. But what it was, it's like, no, something's going on at Lisa's house. She's here all the time. And, many of them said, God, I wish I would have known. I would have got you. I would have taken care of you. So it's really.
Yeah. So do you think that people just aren't curious enough, or what would stop people? Is it just a lack of awareness, or is it that people, as Mark says, that it's just not really the impetus is really there?
It's human nature. This don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah.
Because as soon as someone finds out about something, there are certain things that, if you're a human being, you have to drop whatever you're doing. If you say to someone, hey, how are you doing? And you're being polite, and they say, do you really want to know? Okay. And if you say, well, my son died with an overdose over the weekend. Well, got to run. Nice seeing you, and I'll check in with you again. So I think human nature, and I don't know if this is, JJ, tell us, it seems to me that in America, people are overwhelmed all the time. 24/7, they don't have any room to think about what's on their mind. And you bring up something that causes them to have to pause. It can be great, because if you bring up something that causes them to pause, sometimes the pause is great, no matter how life causes you to do it. But people who are overwhelmed, I don't have room for this. I don't have room to care for this. Oh, all power to you, Lisa. I'm glad you're doing this, and go with God and help those parents and help those kids. And this has really been interesting. I'm late for lunch.
Well, I think people are overwhelmed, and I think it's not just in the US. But of course, there is a culture in the US of work, 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 no time off. Nobody has any time for anything. Everybody's rushing around, going somewhere, doing something, meeting someone, right? And then talking about having met someone and then doing more work. So I do think that there is something in that. There is something in the US psyche, which is less likely to pay attention or want to spend the time, not because they're bad people, but just because it doesn't really kind of fit in with their way of being. And maybe in the UK and Europe and in other cultures and other countries, we have that little bit more time, and people are just a little bit more, maybe not, but just that little bit more open to saying, is everything okay? You're here an awful lot. Is everything okay at home? But then here's the kicker. What if the child just says, oh yeah, everything's great? And we've talked about this before, Mark. It's the child has to feel safe enough to open up. That's the thing as well. So you have to have something coming from both sides.
And I probably wouldn't want to say anything as a child because I wouldn't want to be taken away from that safe space.
Yeah.
Right. If I say something, then maybe I won't be able to come over here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so really it's about also, I think, getting into the schools. I think teenagers especially, and understanding how trauma works and work with their mind and body. I think when parents divorce, age appropriately, it's okay to teach them about, what may go on for them, because a lot of times kids are just angry and I couldn't express. I think I lost my attachment to my mom at 7, at 12, at 13. There's no way. And I wouldn't know how to even teach that, but it's a conversation for professionals like you guys to how do we?
So Lisa, because you're addressing children also, and JJ brought up a good point that this is happening to me. I don't feel safe. I don't want to be a whistleblower on my family because it'll make a bad situation worse. There'll be denials. There'll be people taking me aside saying, how could you do this? So you say you're addressing children. Maybe the first thing is you're saying, look, if you're feeling this, you're not alone. You're not crazy. Even if you're angry, you're not bad. Maybe that's the message. But any thoughts about children saying, yeah, that is happening to me, but there's, I'm still so young. There's no place I can go where it won't backfire.
I think about that a lot. I thought about it a lot, and I go back to high school and I think about, God, I guess if I was at the, in the guidance counselor office and they said, are you mad at one parent? Is one parent, are you being kept away from the other parent? Have you been lied to? I don't know, something that would have made me say that is happening to me. Because if I could go back, trust me, that day that I jumped in the car with my dad and stepmom and said, okay, Mom, I'll see you in a week, and I never came back, I would wish to God I never would have done that. But I was a little kid.
So as part of your mission, so if I'm listening to this, I'm that kid and I don't want to blow the whistle. Is there a place where children, teenagers, under 18, so there's some liability if this goes sideways, is there some place where they can go and at least hear from other children saying that's happening to me and I'm afraid to blow the whistle? I'm glad I'm not crazy, but I can't bring it up because it'll just raise hell. So you're nodding. So what do you think?
Yes. Ginger Gentile, she wrote a blurb for my book. She's also the director of Erasing Families. And I don't know if the link is on my website yet. It should be. But when you click that link, there is a number where kids can call, I believe, and talk, or parents. And I have to get more information on it. But this is like a massive movement. I'm not the only, I mean, I'm just the kid who grew up to prove what happened, which is unusual, but I also have the script, so that helped. So yeah, there's parents in every state, in every part of the country, trying to see their kids. They haven't seen them, some for 15, 20 years. It's like a legal kidnap. And
there is a way for kids in the UK to reach out. And I just want to put that out there right now. We do have something called Childline, where children can phone up anonymously and talk to a counsellor. And I'm just going to give that number here again for Childline. It's 0800 1111. And Childline was set up a long, long time ago to help children who were subject to abuse. So we do have that option here in the UK. If anybody's listening to this, if anybody's child is listening to this and is thinking, oh, I want to talk to somebody about this, but I don't want to talk to my parents because they're the problem. Well, you can phone this number, 0800 1111, and you'll speak to a counsellor, or you can email them. They're online, childline.org, I think it is. I just wanted to say that before we kind of come to an end soon. Mark, have you got any kind of last thoughts? It's been extraordinary talking with Lisa today, hasn't it?
Yeah, I so admire your passion, your commitment to this. And if you're listening in, even if you can't relate to the situation, maybe you can relate to the feelings that Lisa has gone through when you're, I heard a great quote, when you're homesick for a home you never had and sick from the one you did.
Oh, that landed. Yeah.
And if you can relate to that, then you'll be able to relate to the messaging and Lisa and her great new book, Alienated, How to Parent. What's the subtitle again?
When Parents Won't Parent.
When Parents Won't Parent, yeah.
Parents won't.
And Lisa, my experience growing up wasn't nearly as severe as yours, but I do relate to quite a lot of what you're talking about. So thank you so much for sharing your story. And thank you so much for telling us about your book. Mark, it's been, as I say, it's been great having Lisa on today, hasn't it? So anybody who...
Where can people find her? Where can tell us the best way to find you.
You can find me on Instagram, Lisa.Goodpaster, Facebook, TikTok, Stephood and my book is out on Amazon and all the other websites, Barnes and Noble, Goodreads. It's called Alienated, When Parents Won't Parent. And, I just want to say that we break generational cycles out of love, not hate. And this isn't a book that bashes step parents. This is a book that I think every millennial, Gen Z, Gen Xer can relate. And, I want everyone to know we aren't defined by our parents' mistakes.
Fantastic. Lisa, thank you so, so much. That is the end of the show from me, from Dr. Mark Goulston and Lisa Goodpaster. It's goodbye from us, and do join us another time for more Hurt Less, Live More here on UK Health Radio. Goodbye for now.